Welcome to another North-South podcast. During lockdown, still, sport really suffers during lockdown, Darren.
Yeah,
To the point where we just say, all right, no crowd. Let's create bubbles of people who are coronavirus free and play sport that way.
yeah, it's quite weird, but quite a good initiative, especially if you look at the like how things have been happening along with the USC and that creating that
So yeah, Fight
fight
Island,
island
yeah.
bubble kind of
And
thing.
then the NBA bubble as well in Orlando, $106 million to create that bubble.
That's madness. But yeah, this lockdown has just shown me how much sport means to me in my life and how important it is. Because
Things are just empty.
it was a long period without sport, and now that it's back, I don't care that there's no crowd anywhere or I can't go to a game kind of thing. As long as I can watch it, I'm happy.
But I think that's the way of the future. As the population grows, only so many people can go watch it. So most people are going to have to experience it from home.
And it's an
Um,
experiment because if you look back at sports of the past couple of years, especially the likes of say cricket, especially in South Africa, even rugby to some extent, crowds have been dwindling. So if you can play a sport that, yeah, and have a virtual crowd, maybe that is the way of the future.
yeah. But like recently, politics mixed with sport, which isn't usually a good thing. The reason I say I tweeted out that it should be kept separate
Should be.
based on principle because um, if politics and sport were kept separate during apartheid years, you'd be selected based on merit, not on color. Just based on that principle. It's just not good to mix the two. When you get two massive sort of ideologies, like a political ideology or a racial ideology or whatever, that's why the USA separates state and religion and things like that. It's better just not to mix the two, man. That's what makes sports so precious and so unique, is that none of that stuff actually matters in it. It's what you can do on the field at that time. And also another reason why I tweeted it should be kept separate was because of what happened recently. We spoke about in the 2011, was it 2015 World Cup? So you can avoid things like that happening with Vernon Philander coming out and saying I was injured, but they still chose me. It leads to that sort of nonsense happening. And lastly, on that point, I follow the stuff quite closely, and through the years, growing up, going to university, whatnot, the Black Lives Matter movement, proper movement, proper ideology behind it, police brutality, videos of police shooting unarmed individuals, choking them, just all kinds of brutality. Um, Maybe Darren, you can educate me on how things have been going on the left and with the left media and with mainstream media. I doubt you can, but how did this come to the Proteas now?
Oh, I think
Who's been what police brutality is going on? It flies over my head pretty much when it comes to I can understand, which we will get onto, racism within cricket and racism within the Proteas, which you and I will discuss at length now. But when it comes to the BLM movement, is it really something that should be in cricket? Like in terms of the scorecards of the Sky Sports matches and things like that. Like, is this another political media slash something trying to use a proper movement with a proper ideology and in turn staining it and making it like laughable, which is why you get people like Pat and Butter and guys like that coming out. It even gives them a gap to say something about it.
yeah, it's a difficult one that will with everything that's happened, I guess, around the Black Lives Movement. Um, but I agree with you that this political movement should be kept out of it because, or not just cricket, but sports in general, because yeah, it's quite difficult because I guess if you look at the likes of say like LeBron James and that, who has got such a big following and such a people hold him in such high regard that when he speaks in that, a lot of people listen.
Rightfully so, yeah.
From that perspective, he has influence, and if he determines to say something about it, it carries more clout than an everyday person. That's just fact. Um, so it is important for some of these influential people to speak about it, and I think they have a right to share their opinion as well. So
Yeah.
from an individual perspective, I agree that people can say what they want to say, whether it's LeBron
Mm,
James or whatever. But when it comes to now
exactly.
a team, say the Lakers, the Lakers don't need to say anything about it. The Lakers is a sports team. Um, they are an entity that's, yeah, they are not an individual. Um, that is a group of many, many people. So I, that's where I think the separation needs to come in, where a sports team, an individual in a sports team can speak about it, share their opinions, their views, but a team, a franchise, um, shouldn't have to or shouldn't feel the need to express um, themselves in a particular perspective,
Mm.
because it does feel like that. It does feel that some sports teams and franchises and people in that are using this movement for their own good and their own narrative to make them
Virtue signal, basically.
exactly. So I think that needs to
Yeah,
be and
it's
yeah.
it's very nuanced. And one last thing on this point is, I
Oh,
remember in I
carry on.
remember in I remember in I remember in FIFA, it was say no to racism. 100% on board. We know the sort of stuff the Italian players of African descent faced, even in Spain, especially in the UK. The no to racism movement was a proper racism, proper racism movement. Straight off the bat, I can't recall too many other proper drives in sports, but those were proper movements within the sport itself to say no to racism. Maybe you live in the UK. Maybe you can shed some light on what kind of organization Sky Sports is or something like that. But before you do that, I think I've come to the conclusion where simply enough, Black Lives Matter has become the slogan for anti-racism. If you understand what I'm saying, because I was under the I thought that it meant police brutality in the United States.
Mm.
So that's what I thought it meant. But now I think it's like more like a call to action for all sorts of racist stuff that's going on. That's where my misunderstanding came in. But I'll always be of the stance that it should be kept separate. And I think I mostly refer to selection policies. I think that's where our stance as sports podcasters come from, which is why we say it should be kept separate. Because I don't give a flying F what some politician says about a population. I want the best in my team. I don't care about anything beside that. I want the best coaching staff, the best team. So sports podcast is that's as deep as it goes. BLM, now I realize it's formed into a movement for everything, and we'll get into that. Some of the guys coming forward, shock statements, shock people coming forward. And that's something that's pretty shocking within cricket. So yeah, we'll get into that. I don't know if you have any last
Well,
things to say about that. You could explain why the BLM logo is now on scorecards for West Indies versus England. Is it because West Indies are very strong with that statement or something like that? But I found that quite a shock. It's like, how can I say, like, basically, if the right had a slogan, could you imagine watching a game where it said "Make America Great" at the bottom? That would annoy a portion of the population and really empower a different part of the population. So I found it very interesting to find a leftist ideology on such a different, weird sort of platform. I don't know if you noticed that.
yeah, it's different. It's a difficult one because you can't. I wouldn't say the BLM movement is leftist in that it is socialist, and I guess that does fall on the left. But I think majority of people agree with with the underlying ideology that we should all be treated fairly and the
Of
same.
course, yeah.
That's
I mean, that's extreme right people who don't believe that.
but I think like when you talk about the scar thing and that in West Indies and England, there's been a very what's I don't know the right word, a difficult past between the West Indies and
Oh yeah, of course. No, of course. I understand what you're saying about that.
So I think that's what made it so poignant.
Do you think it's like a gesture from the English media and the UK media and stuff to welcome them basically and show like a bit more overwhelming support instead of how I'm perceiving it as like an infiltration of global media?
Yes, I think it's more from that perspective.
Okay, that makes sense.
It's a gesture of goodwill rather than anything else. And yeah, it was fantastic to see the West Indies win that first.
Yeah, that was good.
Very well deserved game. But I think that's more where it came from, just as a good gesture and goodwill. But one of the things I want to get onto is that obviously we've seen now, I think this week or the previous week, with what happened with Ntini. You can speak more on that next.
I think if anything you and I have said in the previous few minutes could suggest that we're like apologists or, you know, maybe heading to the wrong side or the dark side, or we harbor some sort of ill intentions, I think the anger we feel for how Ntini was treated, I think, is mutual between us. I think it's almost personal.
Yeah, but it's I want to add on to that after reading the article and that and looking at a few things, and
I'm genuinely hurt by that article, man.
But the thing is, as well, there needs to be a bit more body to it, because whoever needs to come forward and admit to some wrongdoing, because at the moment it just seems like a very blanket statement. There's no body to it. It's very vague.
I think that's worse.
What?
I think that's worse. I think the reason why he hasn't named anyone is because it was everyone.
But the thing is, you don't see that. Like how
Darren, I remember 2 Caribbean tours where the dude was running almost 8.5 kilometers to the stadium, even on the 5th day. Explain to me why he's doing that. Before we found out.
I haven't heard or seen that. I do know he used to, when we went to watch games in Kingsmead and that, he would, because they would be at the Hilton.
Well, that's close. That's close. I understand.
And I know that he would, walk or run from the Hilton.
There, Indian humidity, Colombo, Sri Lanka. Think about it, Antigua. Those sort of places where it's not ideal to run. Dhaka, Bangladesh, where it's not safe to run. That really sort of cements what he's saying. And I think the way I sort of rationalize it is, we've seen the chaos within the team when they win. We've seen them hugging, champagne, beers and stuff. And he'd always be included in those pictures. But if you think about it, why would he lie?
I don't know. That's the thing. Is like, I don't think he would lie. I don't know if it's, we need to hear another side of the story, because you look at him like he commentates with all his old ex teammates and that, and they seem to always be jovial and good. You see him next to Graham Smith, who was his captain for most of his career, basically. And Graham Smith hasn't said anything. So what is that saying? Like, yeah.
Major counter argument here. Circa 2006, 2007, the Click article that came out. Do you recall that? Tours leading up to 2007, post 2007, a lot of junior players coming out and saying the Proteas are like clicky beyond repair. There's a group of about 4 or 5 guys that hang out together and don't speak to anyone. It's not really a senior junior divide. It seems to be on other sorts of characteristics, and it was confirmed by a bunch of players. Now, is it such a big leap of logic to think a click environment can have a racial aspect?
No, not at all. It's very possible.
So if you this is the way I rationalize it, and this is what hurts. If you in a team like the Proteas during that time and you don't play well, I think you deserve to get treated like how Ntini was. I know it's a bad thing to say, but you copying pairs and you're doing all funny things. Pick it up, boy. You're not one of us until you're one of us. Is there anything Makai could have done to be more of a Protea through and through? His blood's green, man.
No,
He should have been the people flocked to.
like,
Is there a component where it's like a Me Too sort of situation, so he'll sort of add his flavor to how he might have felt? Yes, maybe. But this one, the information sounds really bad in terms of the Proteas, and I've lost a lot of respect for the senior players during those decades. And the running story, Darren, that's smoke. If that's smoke, there's some fire there, because I remember tour after tour thinking, what on earth is this guy doing? What on earth is he doing? These treadmills every week, and he can run around the oval. Why is he running on the street and in the pavement and stuff? So yeah, that really pulled on my heartstrings to see that, man. And then I think maybe you want to move on to the Mikey Holding story, which was
before I get there, is what has also come up is that if you take the BLM movement and you look at it now from a Proteas perspective, and people saying that they want more inclusion of minorities.
No, we've had quotas for ages, man. Exactly. Solid quotas.
And I think we're at a period now where we've probably had as many people of color in our team than ever before. So it also makes me like, why are all these players like, shouting about it kind of thing? Do they want
See, again, it's the left. It's the thing that we constantly come back to, Darren. The left have feelings. Unfortunately. The right likes numbers. So if we're picking more majority of the team black, and honestly speaking, more almost like all of them deserve to be there, man. There isn't one player that everyone's like, he's in the team because of his color, man. Those guys can ball. All of them can play. Some of them are the best in the world, man. Some of them have remarkable futures in front of them, like Temba. Rabada's a shoo-in for Hall of Famer one day if he keeps healthy. It's just a host of players, man. So like, now that the numbers are there and the right's happy, it's all about how you made me feel in the breakfast. I don't want to downplay it, but you understand what I'm saying, Darren.
Yeah, it's taking it to the next level.
The next level now, which isn't a bad thing in terms of healing and reconciliation. But when you're a bit hard-nosed like you and I, and then most of the right, and sport's a bit of a hard-nosed thing, it's sort of like get on with the game. That's how the world runs. There's feelings that need to be dealt with. There's past things, but at the end of the day, you got to get on that field and you got to perform.
Yeah, but it also brings into question then, like, okay, the quote. Are we at a period now where we can say quotas aren't needed because there's enough players of color that are performing well enough that they're in the team? Do we need to keep quotas around? How long do they stay around for? If the team is, say, 80% color,
maybe it switches. Maybe it's super meta now. There's a quarter for white players, a quarter for Indians or something. Who knows? It's all a balls up, in my opinion. Once you start mixing the two, it's always a balls up. Keep it separate. Put the best on the field and let the purists enjoy it, because from you and I's point of view, it'd be one of the few people out there picketing if they decide to get rid of Test cricket. There wouldn't be a lot, but I know you and I would be out there.
I think there would be a lot.
You think so? Well, you're in England, Darren. I mean, you guys love
Yeah, that,
a pint and a good day of Test cricket was not fucking raining or something.
but yeah, I think that
Oi, Darren, that stadium in Southampton, does it look like that or are they building it?
no, it looks like that. It's called the Rose Bowl, and it's basically
It seems like you guys could put grandstands on each side though.
they do have temporary grandstands that they put up for big international games.
Ah, okay.
So they take them down, and it's beautiful when you walk in actually because it's at, at our level you can't see anything. It just looks like this open. There's nothing there. But as you walk up
Mm,
to the seating area and you look down, and it is a bowl with all the seating
all
around it.
right.
It's yeah, very nice.
Um, what else did I notice about that? Obviously, I love no crowds. There's very few sports where I'm missing crowds. I mean, UFC, you get the contact with the fist on the face, the contact with the nick with the knee on the chest or the leg on the body. Cricket, you got the. It's seeming a little bit. I don't know if the bats they're using or whatever, but the sound's not as sweet as it used to be. But I'm loving the banter. I'm loving the chirping. I'm loving the celebrations. I'm loving it all from the stump cam, man. I'm not sure how you feel about that.
Yeah, it is nice. I would have loved to have been in that, gonna watch that Southampton game. Especially, yeah, if it was,
Why don't you go lurk around there, Darren?
it's quite yeah, built up area. There's no
Ah,
way you can view unless you're in the stadium. Um,
as you go close, we'll listen for sounds. Try and hear what's happening.
possible. The only real option would be to go to the Hilton Hotel, which is actually built onto the stadium. Um, and if you're fortunate enough to afford a room at the Hilton,
High up, yeah, yeah.
you're able actually to sit in your yeah hotel room and you're able to watch cricket live off your balcony.
I think there's a few. I think there's one or two stadiums in England that have prominent crowd groups on the rooftops. I don't know if it's Manchester or not, but they come with their flags and everything on the rooftops. And there's another one in Australia as well, where the rooftops are just packed to the brim, and it's a lovely environment. And then during that Southampton test, like Mikey Holding, watching him for donkey's years. Well, how we was young to watch him play, but speaking, his voice is English cricket for us.
Yeah, and also well South African. He spent when Super Sport in the I think about the 2000s, early
Are you
2010.
serious? So he wouldn't just come here with England. He'd come here. He worked
He
for
was
Supersport.
he worked yeah for
Okay, okay.
and yeah. So I remember
He's
yeah listening
he's
to him.
he's hard nosed, man. He's a proper quickie, man. He's hard nosed. He doesn't really give an f. He's old school. He's toughened up. So to see him break down, I was like, "What on earth is going here? Did someone pass away or something?" Like, um, do you recall like what? He's like over 65. Why now? Why is he? It's remarkable in my opinion.
I think it's just
How he's decided to start speaking about all the things that he went through, and I can tell you as a person of color to say that. What did he say in the interview he was on the news? He said, "My mother's family stopped speaking to her because my father wasn't light enough." All African descent, and you even have that racism within races. That's incredible stuff, man. That's nuanced and that's in depth and that's horrifying.
yeah. I think that it's obviously yeah. Like I said, the timing and that is obviously with the movement and that with BLM. Obviously, he decided that it was a good time to bring this up and. Um, He also spoke alongside another Ebony Rainsford, who also was a woman of color that played for England.
Oh, yes, I saw that as well. And her story was even more heart wrenching, Darren. Cheapers, creepers.
I think
Oh,
the combination
man.
of being a woman in cricket, along with being of color, um, would make it extremely difficult. It's just to think back, like when we were in primary school, even high school, and that there was no such thing as girls cricket. Like, uh,
Yeah.
so it would be so difficult for a girl to break into cricket because there was no grassroots for it. But then to add onto the difficulty for a woman to play cricket, the game, and then adding the racial aspect to it, it's just this making it so difficult to play a game that you love, and it's not meant to be that way. So from her side, you could get that, and then obviously from Marky's side, obviously back when he was in his prime playing for the West Indies, and that it was, what was that, the 80s.
Yeah, that was in the pits of it though. It was rampant throughout the world, height of apartheid.
Yeah, and I think that was, racial things were still, they might have been going downwards kind of thing globally. Countries were standing against it, but there was still quite a big fringe group around that. And obviously, you look in South Africa with the rebel tours and that, and the stigmas attached to that. And I know Mikey mentioned the rebel tours and how, I disagreed with some of his rhetoric around that, where he said he couldn't talk to the guys that went on rebel tours, and that he didn't agree with them wholeheartedly. But then, from my perspective, if I take a step back, those rebel tours were done because the South African government wouldn't let wouldn't let players of color come, basically, and the other unions, international unions, didn't want to send their players there. So the South African guys decided to make their own team, basically. Come play with us. We just want to play cricket. That's all we want to do.
Exactly, which is why my opinion always stays: keep politics and sport separate.
Exactly. But I think, and like you said, with Mikey speaking about his story and with his mom and family back in the West Indies and that, and me mentioning earlier that the West Indies and England have had a very difficult past because of the colonization of those, the West Indies and that, and just how, if the documentary we did, Fire in Babylon, if you watch that.
And that went in depth about who eventually took the blood money and came here, and how their lives got ruined after that. Yeah,
and also just showed you how rampant the hatred between English and West Indies was back then, more from the English side rather than the West Indian side. I think the West Indian sides have always been happy-go-lucky, relaxed guys. But when, I forgot who it was.
Tony Gregg.
Yeah, mentioned something.
The late South African Englishman, Tony Gregg.
Making them grovel. That really stuck with the West Indian team of that era. And I think it has stuck with them since, because Mikey brought it up. And it's always something that's brought up when you talk about.
And Darren, where does Basil de Oliveira, the trophy that they named after him, where does he fit into the situation? He was born in South Africa and managed to go to the UK. And then when the UK team wanted to come here, South African government didn't want to let Basil travel over because he was Cape Coloured. Is that where that story stems from?
I'm not.
Where does Mikey Holding fit into that? Because I remember that playing a major part. I think that was also part of the reason why people began to boycott. So it's messy, Darren. And overall, do you know really what hurts me the most? I was looking at test records the other day, test match records. There are South Africans appearing as early as 1880, 1890. We have that prowess. Whenever they gave us a chance to play international cricket, we were there. Barry Richards played 4 tests, Darren.
I know.
He's in the ICC Hall of Fame.
Yeah. I think it's
cripplingly sad.
A lot of the South African players along that era, when we were kicked out and that, suffered the most. I feel so sorry for them, because these guys were because of the
Graham Pollock's average, Darren. Steve Smith-esque.
yeah,
Back then, uncovered wickets.
yeah.
Are you serious? No one could have touched us. I promise you, Darren, there would have been two Bradmans in this country by that time. There would be two people who would have been better than Bradman, and there would have been one who was better than Lily. I promise you that if they gave us a chance.
You just look
Um,
at the team lists from the late 80s, early 90s, the South African team, stacked with guys that are
Darren,
arguably.
how do you play 4 test matches and people call you the greatest test batsman of all time in their opinion? How? Get me that footage. I promise you, if there's a time machine and there's somehow footage, look for you and I sitting somewhere in the back there. Because that's exactly where the fuck I'd go, man. That and Brian's 400. Those are the two places I'd go. I promise you that right now.
Obviously that just speaks to how good he was.
No, but it's a tragedy, Darren, and it can never be allowed to happen again. But I think the murkiness between sports and politics is tangled, and I don't see it going anywhere good. And we just got to hold on and just, as long as they don't touch Test cricket, if I'm selfish enough to say that. As long as they don't touch Test cricket.
The one thing that's interested, I read today was that England cricket, in response to the BLM movement and that, and getting more minority representation when it comes to coaching and management and that they are going to introduce a rule called the Rooney Rule or something, where I think its traces back to America and that, but ensuring that at least one person of color is interviewed for every position. And when I read that, I just thought of South Africa and quotas, where it's heading towards.
Well, Darren, I know there's enough South Africans on that side to raise the flag in terms of providing empirical data as to how that does not work when you don't hire on merit. And if you find that you're not finding people of color who are on merit, shift your resources to get people of color up to the level where they can do the job. Because in South Africa, they convolute how much the salary is to what the production is. A country is run by GDP, gross domestic product. You have to bring something to the party. It doesn't matter how much you get paid. And I promise you, the United Kingdom has not been built on anything beside that. You spend a hard day's work, you show me something at the end of it, and I'll give you some money. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. But like it goes back to the thing of just separating politics and and sport, but as well just putting your focus in the right areas and not having to come up with things like this. Rather start off with grassroots. That's where it all begins.
Exactly.
Put more money into grassroots. That's where it is, and putting more money into developing whether it be
sport as well. Exactly, transferable to sport. Yeah.
Yeah. Rather than putting in something like, we'll interview a person of color every time we apply a position. That's not helping anyone. That's just saying that you're going to interview another person.
Showboat. Exactly.
Exactly. It's showboating. It's not actual tangible plans to make a change long term. That's a short fix. It's not a goal.
Darren, in closing, when the heat or not really heat, should I say the buzz around Whiskey Wotan ends down, we need to get him on the podcast because of what happened last week, so we can really have a good laugh about him, about it with him, because that was one of the biggest bloopers / fails / fucking hilarious things I've ever seen. My God, if the left had ever had egg on their face, Darren, that was absolutely brilliant. I kept going back to see if she's deleted it yet. She doubled down, Darren. She doubled down on it. That is amazing. If any of you guys don't know the story, man, follow Wota and ZA on Twitter and you'll see it. News articles and everything. Darren, it's so indicative of how the left.
You see the cartoon about it.
It's so indicative of how the left thinks, Darren. It's amazing. I promise you, if I ever set foot in a psychology lecture or had anything to do with psychology, that would be my project for the next few days, is to break down how incredible that interaction is. Yeah, just incredible stuff. So yeah, Wotan, just waiting for you to become free so we can speak to you about it. Definitely the highlight of the year on Twitter, Darren.
Well, anyway, before we get on to more political stuff, I think that's a good place to end the show.
Yeah, no, that anyone who knows us know we did almost a year of incredibly deep political stuff. Often when I see the guys that we spoke to on the podcast and I see them in Parliament, I'm like, oh shit, these guys are the real deal. But yeah, anyway, guys, cheers. Stay safe.